What up, guys? Here we go. Here we go. Let's get some Jordan Peterson going. So, yeah, I've had a good day. Got to go watch my little granddaughter, Gianna, play her first little soccer game today. It is funny. I get one day off. One day off a week. And I got to tell you, I could not think of a better way to spend my damn time than being out there watching her play soccer. She was so scared for the first half of it that she literally was crying and would not go out on the field. It was so adorably funny and sad. But the last end of the game, she got out there, and man, it just made my day. And I couldn't have thought a better way to spend my day off. So, got to enjoy that. So, I wanted to show you guys some stuff. Oh, and I got a palm tree cut down in the back of my yard. Yep. So, got some stuff handled. All right, here we go, people. I love you. Thank you for being here. Give a thumbs up. So help with the algorithm.
As you know, we often talk on this show about political revolutions. But tonight, we'll meet someone who's at the forefront of a revolution that's much more personal. A revolution in the way people think and the way they behave. Far-left Democrats appear to be weaponizing...
What up? Give a thumbs up, guys. Helps with the algorithm.
To gain political
Thanks for being here, guys.
However, some say the PC pandemic it poses a far greater challenge. And when I began my tenure as Surgeon General, he had told me that I would be thinking about and talking about loneliness as much as I have. I would have
Jordan
told
Peterson's coming up. Here we go.
But it's hard not to notice that the incidence
30 more seconds.
Of Americans, the number of Americans on psychiatric medication is rising, but so is the suicide rate. What do you make of that? Now, if you're one of the few people who still hasn't heard of Dr. Peterson, his meteoric rise to fame has brought him to the forefront of
I don't know about that.
With his message influencing of people around the world. In fact, Dr. Peterson has been described as the most influential public intellectual in the Western world right now.
Wow, because he told I won't call transgenders by a different gender.
In Genesis, in the Old Testament,
he's still pretty smart.
The fundamental idea of Genesis that God uses the logos, the word of God, to cast potential. You know that the future is unstructured. You have a potential within you that can meet that, and there's a potential that characterizes the future. You meet it with eyes open and with truthful speech. And that's what happens in Genesis, because God uses the logos, which is truthful speech, to cast the pre-cosmogonic potential into habitable order. And then he says it's good. And
yes, he is. I like this man.
Is habitable order good?
You know, one thing I always laugh about, I'm like, could you imagine if any of us had this guy as our father or an uncle? You know what I mean? Like, could you imagine the difference of who we'd be as a person if this man was in your life from the beginning? My goodness.
We'll question whether or not the order that we inhabit is good. And the hypothesis in the Old Testament is that if truthful speech gives rise to the order, then that order will be good. And that's really something, man. Like, that's really something to apprehend. It's a fundamental theological presupposition that the way that you take the potential upon which the cosmos is predicated and cast it into the order that allows everyone to thrive is by using truthful speech. Wouldn't it be something if that was the case? And the thing is, you know it's the case. You know it. You know it. Because you do not admire yourself if you're deceitful. You admire yourself when you have those rare moments in your life where you can actually stand up.
I'll be back in a couple. I'm going to go fall in my pool.
And if you give that respect to other people, if you treat them as if they're the locale of the divine speech that casts potential into habitable order, then they like you. Maybe they even love you and they get along with you and you can work with them and you can cooperate with them and you can compete with them. So not only is it something arbitrary.
Sorry guys, kicking me off.
We're only playing in the West. None of that. It's the most fundamental truth that the
universe has ever discovered. Sorry, just kick me off.
At our absolute peril. And it's not death, it's worse than that, the peril. Because there are worse things than death. And the worst thing than death is hell. And we saw plenty of that in the 20th century.
Sorry guys.
And when we let freedom of speech go, that's where we're headed. And unless we want to go there, then we should stop.
Anybody still here?
Most of our dialogue in mainstream media,
fucking stupid phone, man.
Always focused on political issues, and so if you have a hammer, then everything looks like a nail.
Right.
But it's also the case that part of what brought me to wider public attention was my opposition to some legislation in Canada,
Oh,
a
you
bill called
fucking
C-16,
man.
which I
Stupid
regarded
fucking
as
phone.
an attempt on the government's part to control speech. But in private speech, there's
Anybody
no
here?
compulsion from
You
the
guys
government.
not, huh? Kicked y'all
Different
off.
than forbidding you to say certain things, because this was a requirement for a certain form of speech, and that emerged in this bill C-16, which purported to do nothing but extend certain rights to the transgender community in Canada, but which was, in my estimation, and I read the policies very carefully, an attempt to write a particular view of gender into the law.
Sorry, kicked you guys off.
Gender is only a consequence
Fucking
of
new one's supposed to come in on
conditions
Tuesday.
socially constructed, which is patently false and runs contrary to what I would regard as thoroughly settled science, and also to compel a certain form of address. And I felt that that meant that the politicians in Canada were using a false compassion and a certain ideological attitude to justify extending dominion over the content of free people's
After this
speech.
is over, I'm going to
The
start
enemies
something
of
else
free
live.
speech, they're the enemies of
Sorry,
the
guys.
process that turns potential into habitable order. They're enemies of the divine principle. And worse, they're their own enemies. Right? Because this isn't, well, some of us believe in free speech and some of us don't. It's way deeper than that. And more importantly than that, that's how our entire society views you. The reason that individual sovereignty inheres in you, why you have the rights of a citizen, and why you're regarded as a sovereign individual, is because our entire culture over thousands of years has actually decided that there's something in you of ultimate value that the entire stability of the entire society depends on, that you could bring forward and nurture, and that the world would definitely be a lesser place without. That's way better than you're okay the way you are. Right? I think people agree with that. If you don't believe in free speech, you don't believe in the implicit divinity of mankind, you don't believe in the sovereignty of the individual, you don't believe in sovereignty as such, you're a totalitarian of some sort, which means you attribute all the divine power to yourself. And then we know where that leads, right? It doesn't matter whether it's on the right or the left. If we had any sense and we took a look at 20th century history, we know exactly where things go. And we could easily choose not to go there. And so when we see someone like Raif, who's imprisoned by a reprehensible dictatorship, that we have the gall to call our allies, then what we see is a system that's not only hell-bent on the destruction of an innocent and good man, but directly antithetical to everything.
You see this as breaking his heart as he says it. It's crazy.
This
man's got heart. Oh, you bastards.
Yep. It's one of those commercials where the rapper, you can't even remember his name.
No, we can't remember your name, BS. You're not worth it.
Evidence of being itself. And so,
Look at him. He's about to fucking break down into fucking tears, dude. This man's trying to spread real truth to you, brothers and sisters.
no. And I've been so absolutely appalled by the Western world's weak-kneed response to the attacks of totalitarians upon our freedom of speech. What was done with Salman Rushdie, that was a big mistake, right? Because it wasn't Rushdie, it was the free-speaking artistic tradition of the West. And not only of the West, right? The free-speaking artistic creative tradition upon which the cosmos is properly established. That's what it was. And we all bowed down. We all bowed down with no resistance whatsoever. It was a massive error. We're going to pay for that for a very long time. We did the same thing with the Danish cartoons. And you don't want to think about these sorts of things as happening far away. Nothing happens far away. When it happens somewhere else, it's happening right here too. And that's why we're all here today, because we recognize that at least on some level. And we have to stop.
Sorry if it kicked you off before.
Being so naive about our, let's say, our moral relativism. We need to take a look at history and biology in a very, very fundamental way. And we need to really understand what our culture and genuine cultures everywhere are predicated on. And that is the idea that the sovereign voice of the individual is the power that casts potential into habitable being and restructures tyrannical order when it needs to be restructured. Right? And that's what each of us are. That's the divine presence in each of us. And I do believe that there is no more fundamental truth than that. I don't believe that you can dig down underneath that. I think that's bedrock. That's the foundation stone of the house. That's
Amen,
the cornerstone
brother.
of the house. And it requires everyone to courageously confront the tyranny that's them and the unknown that surrounds them, and to live with true speech as the highest value. That's how we sort out the world. And I do believe that it's incumbent on us to understand the absolutely fundamental role that these processes take. I know we're here today because we all have at least an intimation of that, right? We know that there's something about free speech that's so central that we cannot allow attacks on it to go unchallenged no matter where they occur.
Dr. Peterson, it's a pleasure to see you today.
Thank you.
Dr. Peterson, reading you and hearing you on YouTube, what have you, it seems to be you clearly have an issue with ideologues on both the extreme left and the extreme right. What I call the twin cobras, or the matter and antimatter of our political discourse. So you wrote in your book that our minds are deeply social. And so with that question, as a social scientist, are we nurtured to the views that we have grown to have, or are we somehow hardwired by nature to some degree to have a tendency toward one way of thinking or the other? And if we are, if you started to agree with that, if we are predisposed to have some sort of leaning one way or the other, then are we not doomed to a sense of zero-sum warfare for political power? Winners and losers like your
What's up, Sergeant? You want some corn?
So the first thing I would say is we are tilted by our biological temperament in terms of our political viewpoint. So we know, for example, that conservative people tend to be higher in conscientiousness, a big 5 personality trait, especially in the orderliness element of that trait. And they tend to be lower in another trait, openness. And openness is, broadly speaking, the creativity trait. And so, whereas liberals are high in openness but low in orderliness. And there is very powerful biological tilting towards those temperamental predispositions. Now, they can be moved by experience, but it's as if you have a set point and then you have to strive to move from that set point. Okay, so, and then of course, your viewpoints can be modified by your experience and your wisdom, all of that. But you have to start out with a set of filters on the world because the world is too complicated. Okay, so that's not
Sorry,
necessarily a
keeps
bad
kicking me
thing
off my
because
own
there
live
are different
stream,
niches for people
like
of
most of
different
you.
So, for example, introverts are good at such things as accounting. They're more because they can work alone, whereas extroverts are better at things like sales.
I'm going to
So
start a
there's
new
place for
feed
people on
in about
both ends of the
10
temperamental
minutes on my other
distribution.
phone that
So
doesn't
you
do
need
this.
people who are wild experimenters in thinking and those who are more conservative. Like if you want to hone the way you think, you need opposition. You need something pushing against you. But what has to happen, and this is rule 9, is you have to assume that the person that you're listening to, that you're talking with, knows something you don't. And so we can engage in a dialogue between left and right. The right tends to stand for hierarchy and to value hierarchies as tools for obtaining necessary goals. And the left tends to view hierarchies as characterized by the proclivity to dispossess and to become tyrannical. Those are both correct. Through the dialogue, we can keep the hierarchies functional. Now, because you might think, well, there's no shortage of ways to live in the world. That's a morally relativistic stance. And there's something to that, obviously, because people differ in occupations, and differ in outlook, and so forth. They differ in political beliefs. So there's obviously many ways that we can thrive in the world. And so some degree of flexibility, whether or not there are any reliable meta-narratives, let's say, overarching narratives that unite people in some fundamental way. And so I was curious, were these just two arbitrary ways of looking at the world, both potentially equally valid? And were we battling that out because we didn't know and there was no other way to battle it out? Or was there something deeper at stake? Was it possible that one or the other system was correct in some deep manner? And so I started to study deeply this particular question. The first question was, well, what were beliefs made out of? Like, what exactly is it? What are we talking about when we talk about a belief? What does it mean that you have beliefs? Well, how are beliefs structured? So that was a psychological question rather than a political or economic question. And that took me a long time to figure out because I didn't know if the fundamental question was going to be sociological or political or economic or psychological. And it turned out to be psychological, and perhaps it turned out to be spiritual. That's another way of thinking about it.
All right. So I'm going to hop over to, I'm going to take about 5-10 minutes, and then I'm going to start another live stream on my phone that does not continue to do this. So sorry about that in the middle of it.